Recording. Don't worry.
Good.
Okay. Well, welcome guys to this official Solstice Day today. It started, at least here it was in the very early hours in the morning that it kind of officially started the summer. Yeah. And well, we are going to be looking into the last module of this space-time structure course. And well, and to kind of wrap up this year, yeah, also it's a bit of a wrapping up this year, which in the way that the communication has established, it has been it's been kind of ordering something, yeah. It's like ordering something which occurs in a non-linear way, but there's something in our neurology that requires a certain order and able to use it in reality, where in reality it isn't that strict order also. Yeah, it's kind of like everything is happening at the same time. So we're going to be kind of finishing that way of focusing it this year and opening kind of the next year, which is, it's going to be different, yeah? Starting with the meeting we have in Holland, and the way that I'm going to be presenting the communication for those who want to participate in the proposal, which is not going to be so much like in a kind of programmed way, yeah. It's more going to be like, what's up, what's happening, what's going on, yeah. Probably maybe the path I'll be using maybe is just kind of Alejandra's events would be the way of conducting it, but maybe to use it as a kind of guideline of organizing in time, yeah, sharing new parameters, but also just to see what's emerging, yeah, what's emerging from this kind of order that we've seen. Use it as a platform to now just allow, have a vocabulary also, that's very important, have an extraterrestrial vocabulary from where to also voice that which is emerging, yeah? Because this basically what's allowing us is to have a kind of language which is allowing us to name areas which we are part of but haven't been named. Okay, so to not confuse, we're using all these kind of parameters at the end of the day, yeah. Because this, at the end, it's not a technique, and it's not a how to do. So what is it? It's parameters of being able to voice what consciousness is experiencing through us. It's like enabling us to give voice to it, yeah, which I think is very important for the human kingdom. The human kingdom wants to explain itself. It wants to talk. It wants to say it. It wants to write it. It needs that communication, something which the other kingdoms, it's not that important, yeah. So, but for the human to be able to do that, it needs that support of the other, the receptivity of the minerals and its interconnectivity, the processing of the inner processing of the plant kingdom, which the processing is global consciousness processed and personal consciousness, which in photosynthesis, the way it's like luminic energy processed into chemical energy, yeah. But if we see it not only as energy, but also as consciousness, that's basically what we're doing here. Like we are connecting with impersonal consciousness, but we're doing a personal process. which is very important because we are an angle of reality. So we need to process it within our angle. And then we have that animal which is moving it and printing it. It's like the animal, when it moves it, it's not only processing, it's moving it around. It's like printing it. It's like, and then the human is kind of like, it is participating in it coordinates all these. It administrates its kind of mineral kingdom, its plant kingdom, its animal kingdom. Administrates, not controls, exploits, and dominates. I'm talking about consciousness here. More, okay, there is an expression in existence, but it's consciousness. It's like my human aspect can do a coordination of how my minerals are receiving, you know, and storing, receiving and storing, like water receives and stores, yeah. How it's processing it, how, etc. It's like it's doing that coordination. And why is it coordinating all that? Because it's making sense of it all. It's participating in self-consciousness. It needs, the human kingdom is very important to make sense of things. Yeah. It's just something that it's part of its function, but it is something that the earth needs for us to do. It's that making sense, that participating in self-consciousness, you know, self-awareness. That making sense is something that is not fixed. So there's something that the interpretation of the humans has to be able to kind of form itself and deform itself to increase, yeah. So all that said, the human needs parameters of language, and those parameters of language is like when a human is able to verbalize it, it can consciously be activated. It's like we've always been part of the mineral kingdom, and our minerals have always been working very well, very fine. But the human conscious participation is, I have to name its quality, and then it activates consciously. This is something that is very important for the human. The naming process is the conscious activation of that area which we already have, which we already are. So global convergent logic is not providing anything that we aren't. It's just providing a way of parameters to verbalize areas of our multi and interdimensional aspects, yeah. So it's something very important of being able to name it, yeah. Yeah. So so in this last module of the space-time structures, we're going to be looking into what we saw the other day as the Tumi. And the Tumi, what is it? Remember, it's how the ring of fire is these last 13 days of the year, which we are going through right now. There's something that Gabi said and I couldn't understand, and now I understand it. A pity she's not here, but she will. There you go, Gabi. Gabi, I remember you saying something about the months, or let me see if I understood well. To see, okay, so we have these 13 days. We have one in the, let's draw it again. We have, well, let's draw it, or let's just upload the image. So we have this one in the middle, okay? The first day of the Ring of Fire is day 353 of the year. Now, that is a processor. a centralized processor of 12 other, like a clock, 12 other areas. And I think, Gabi, you were saying that it's like connecting or integrating the 12 months of the year. Is that correct? I've never heard that, but it did resonate. Gabi.
I somewhere picked it up, and but I only think it's not from 1 to 12, but from 12 to 1.
Yes.
Backwards.
Yes, it's going in the future, kind of. It's going from the left to the right, like counterclockwise. It's going from the future to the past. It's like it's doing the integration the other way around, yeah? So what I'm saying is that there's this similarity with a clock, and there's the similarity or this connection with the 12 months that we're integrating. Yeah. But to integrate 12, we need the 13th element, you know? Yeah. Because there has to be something that is connected in the center with all of them. So that's another way of seeing these last 13 days. Yeah. Sure. And I didn't understand what you said. And then it just kind of dawned, okay, yeah, she's mentioning this. And I thought, okay, that does make sense. It does make sense. So the last 13 days are representing this processor integrating this kind of movement of 12, okay, movement of 12.
But 12, from 12 to 11, from 11 till 10, not from 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I got you. So, like, let's say today we would be in 3, 5, 6. So we would be 12, let's see, 12, 11. We'll be like in the position 10. Yeah?
Okay, here.
Okay, yeah, I got. But in the sense, it's just about, what I liked about it, it gives us this notion of what's the purpose of these 13 days. And it's integrating this 12 aspect, 12 months, 12 positions on the clock. Something that I haven't talked too much about it, but it's the 12-based universe, okay? Which we could call it more the analogical printing, the analogical printing of the universe. So, and well, 12 is one of these numbers, yeah, of completion and all that. But yeah, it did resonate. So now this ring of fire, what is it integrating? It's the consciousness of the whole year. But you see, it goes from the future to the past. This is giving us some clues. When we are born, there is a future element that is has the wave, we could say, the wave consciousness, which is already connected with the moment of our birth, and it's setting a kind of it's setting certain moments, specific moments in time, in space also, but in time, with which we are going to have a formation of our personal consciousness, which we could call neurological consciousness. Okay, impersonal, we could say it's logical consciousness. It's not neurological, because impersonal consciousness doesn't need a brain, it doesn't need those things. But to be able to express itself through a person or an individual vehicle, it requires a body, and that body requires a nervous system, a neurology, etc. Yeah, that's what the Tumi is doing. It's setting these dates on which the individual vehicle is constructing its own neurology to participate in the neurology of the expressed universe. Because like the whole universe, we could say it's the organism of nothingness. It's like the expressed organism of the the consciousness of nothingness. Yeah. And to be able to interconnect itself, it's like a nervous system. It's like the neurology of nothingness. Actually, when you see images of the universe, it looks like Susan put that video, which was very beautiful. That kind of fractal representation, you know, between us and the universe. But if you look at, you know, the clusters of galaxies and all that, it looks like a neurological net, because it is. That's the thing. But we are part of that. You know, we are connected with that cosmic net, if you want. But we have to mature in a biological sense, not only, you know, consciousness, like in a biological. If we want to participate in this expressed universe, we also require biological maturity. Yeah, well, the Tumi is kind of doing that. Yeah, with this. Is this clear up to now? Is this kind of? I know that maybe the dates and all that. But is the concept of Ring of Fire, of Tumi? Is it clear? Is it like? Yeah, is it? Well, silence means, or it's processing, or it's clear. but if there's any specific thing. Now, another way of seeing the Tumi is also expressing how this, because there's an area of our consciousness which we could call wave consciousness, or let's put it digital consciousness. Yeah. That's that which in spiritual terms maybe is called the soul. The soul. But the soul, it's more like an algorithm, you know. They call it the almic group thing. I call it algorithmic group. Because in that area of wave consciousness, we can't, like, in the self-recognition of that area, when you try to explain it from this area, it sounds like a story. It's like, in this other area, we meet and my soul and your soul, we talk and we make a script and all that. But it's like a story, you know. It's like, it's the best way to try to communicate that. Now, what I want to say here is something that Mienke asked me many years ago, which was about reincarnation. Okay. Now I've had another clarity about this reincarnation thing, and it's that it is true that there is this kind of algorithm which has its own kind of definition, which is part of an algorithmic group, what we call soulmates or soul blah blah blah. Okay, algorithmic group. Now you see that area of that soul area of consciousness, it's digital. It's like, it doesn't work how things work here, or in this Zoom in the analogical. Yeah, but it has got a self-definition. Now that algorithm is in that wave consciousness. At one point, it's going to be processed in the processor, okay? And that at some point is going to be biologized. It's going to become a biology, okay? Now, what the biology does, or the biological manifestation of that does, it allows to experience the algorithm. When it experiences the algorithm, it is increasing its coherency. So what is a soul? It's an algorithm which is in a construction of coherency. So when you die, so let's say when the biology dies, the algorithm is still there. And that algorithm, which is going to again be used and like somatically into a body, kind of. Yeah. So there is this notion of reincarnation, but you see, it's more like it's more like how technology works than how storytelling, the storytelling of the soul that comes in the body. Okay, that is a way of explaining it, but it's still kind of like I'm trying to, in my words, explain, I think, in a more logical way. So there is this kind of reincarnation thing going on, but it's an algorithm, it's an equation which is maturing. It's an equation which is increasing its coherency. And it does reparticipate. It does participate. That wave consciousness does participate, and increases that. And that algorithm, which is not David, for example, it's not David. But it does have this kind of, it does have a definition and a differentiation, but it's linked with other algorithms which are like connected to the same sense. So we have that algorithmic group, and then you have this feeling when you meet somebody who's participating in algorithm, and you have this feeling of, I've met you before, where in Greece or whatever. You see, that is the whole blah 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 blah, which probably it has elements of truth, but what is interesting of that is that there's this recognition that it doesn't come from my biology. It doesn't come from my biological memory. It's not like, oh, I saw you. It comes from another area. That area is like this, the wave consciousness area, okay? So there is that occurring, that is that area kind of occurring. And I'm gonna, because the difficult thing is from this biological consciousness, that from where we are meeting here, it's very difficult to try explain that area, because that area is completely different. So the best thing we do is we use stories, like storytelling, and we fill it with romanticism and all that, but it's not that. That is just a very nice, warm way of explaining it. But I do think I can, look, because we recognize this area within ourselves. Where I have consciously kind of had a zoom into this area, there's a moment that you are kind of like, you're asleep, but not completely, and you're a bit awake. And there is this feeling that there, like if it's the matrix, like if there is this processing in a very fast speed of data. Have you guys been through that experience? Because that would be the best way I can explain that. You see, it's like like if it's, and in that moment you understand it. You at that moment just like, okay, yeah, this is obvious. But then when you kind of go, the zoom goes into the biological consciousness, like, what the hell was that? I can't remember anything. It is just like a whole bunch of things going, synchronizing at a very fast speed. But it's like, what, I don't know what that. Now I sense that soul area, or that wave consciousness, that's how it kind of operates in that way. It's not like there's the soul in this kingdom of souls, and they having a cup of tea and dialoguing what they're going to do in the next life. That is just, it's like it's like a human transference of it. It's much more digital than that. It's much more less romantic. It's much more algorithmic. It's a bit, it is a bit cold. It's like, it's basically seeing which equation works. It's like, that's how, this is the warm. This is when it becomes warm. This is where the the algorithm becomes an experience where this smell, okay, this is, but to try use this to explain that area, it's disappointing. You know, it's like when you see a movie and you see all these special effects and you're like, wow, it's amazing, but then you see how they really made it, you know, like, and it's like, or the Game of Thrones or something, you know, and you're seeing the images and, you know, the armies, and but then when they show you how it really happened, it was just this guy with a green background, you know, you think it's flying on a dragon, and they just with strings going like this, you know. It's like very disappointing. Yeah. So it's more technical, that area. It's more technical. Here's when it becomes more physical, and it's important for it to be nice and warm here, because it gives the algorithm the possibility of experience. You know, so it's not very ideal to make this into algorithmic, but not, you know, but not either to try project that area from the, it's just not going to be really aligned. But this element of reincarnation, it just kind of really came to me that yes, it occurs in a way, yeah. And then something Gabi says, that area is about a liver cell is recognizing a liver cell. Yeah, that's a good analogy. Like, I think the body, the organism, is a good analogy. So when a cell dies, the information, the new information that cell has been through is like an algorithm that is kept within, it's like a continuum equation that's kept within the memory of that liver, you see? So there, you know, it isn't wasted. You know, it isn't wasted. So it's kind of like that, yeah. But I have to say, like, in spirituality, there's so much bullshit going on. It's not like gazing an eye, we're swim. It's like so much decorated over that we can't see the beauty of what it really is. The meeting of two biologized algorithms which are recognized in a participation. You know, like when we are decorating it too much, we can't see the beauty for what it is. That's what I see. You know, we try to, because that's why we decorate it. That's why people decorate it so much in spirituality, because they can't see the beauty for what it is. So they have to decorate. They have to make it beautiful because they can't see the beauty of the simplicity of what it is, you know. So that's where you get this kind of feeling in this, that it's not genuine. I'm not sure if this has happened to you guys. Like, it's not genuine. It's just, it's kind of like it's kind of like forced. You know, it's like forced. This is not genuine. But, okay. Well, I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but let me see this. Let me put this. And these algorithms are non-determining. Can you rephrase that, Laura?
Yes, my internet is very slow and it gets disconnected. So I was trying to, those algorithms, where they are determining us in a way, but they can kind of be overcome. I guess that's the question.
Yes, because the algorithm is not perfect. The algorithm isn't our, I just want to make a difference here, okay? The algorithm area of consciousness is not nothingness. It is the coding that nothingness creates. So the soul or the digital consciousness is a technology of nothingness, okay? which allows us. So what happens? These algorithms have margins of error. They have to have margins of error, yeah. Because if not, it would be a perfect equation, and it just wouldn't make sense to live it. So it has margins of error. Margins of error allow us to have margins of error in an algorithm. It's what when it is transferred into a biological density, we could say, it becomes a limitation. You see, I am not the whole universe. I'm a body in the universe, meaning I have a limitation. So anything that I'm processing isn't the totality, you see? So algorithms do that. Now, there's another mechanism that occurs in space-time, is that anything that is created always tends to grow. What does that mean? To increase its coherency. Now, a biology increasing its coherency is renewing the coherency of the algorithm. So this means both worlds are very much connected. It's the same way that a programmer, which is using algorithms to make a program, but when it uses it, it can see that it's not perfect, so then it can correct it in the algorithm by experiencing it. So look, can you guys see that image? 354 is talking about more the algorithmic area of consciousness, the digital. 360, it's more the gravity, the biological, okay, we could say. The formation of the particle, wave. And what is 353? It's the processor. It's something that is processing both things. So there's a communication between the algorithm and its between the digital and the analogical. Alejandra, when she talks about analogical, she's talking about like the physics, like the more, physical, the physical kind of, But 354, it's more zeros and ones. But in 360, it's a continuum experience. It's a continuum. So these are two technologies that nothingness has to communicate both areas, yeah? So it's defines, but it doesn't determine. You see that difference? It defines a limitation. That algorithm defines a limitation, but it doesn't determine it. Why? Because the algorithm isn't perfect. That's why the whole feeling of the soul is incomplete and all that story. It's not perfect. It's that it mustn't be perfect, because it would break the rule of continuum evolution, continuum growing, because nothingness has an infinite amount of possibilities of increasing its coherency. It has no limits in that, you know? So was I able to respond to the question? Also, okay, so this is also like, how can I say, it's not the answer of reality. It's I'm trying to transfer something in words for each of you to have a self-recognition. So it's not about believing this or anything. It's like, oh, okay, he's putting into words this thing going on that I've always recognized, that there's an element of me that is not just biology. There's something in me that's not just biology, yeah, and it's not nothingness either. It's like it's the computer program that nothingness is writing. That's a beautiful way of putting it. So it's the computer program that nothingness is writing in order to experience itself from different angles. Yeah? Because what would nothingness be? It wouldn't be 354. It wouldn't be 353. It wouldn't be 360. It would be the white it's in the background. It's the the absolute, which is the source of all technologies. Consciousness to existence, yeah? And to go from consciousness to existence, you need a program, a matrix. You need something there, okay, to allow that. Good. Okay, so these are like 3 areas that we are connected with, yeah? We're connected with this wave consciousness, which is more digital, this more particle consciousness, which is more, we could say, biological, and then we have 353, which is this processor, okay? Good. So what is the rest doing? It is creating the left, which is me, and the right, which is tu. What does that mean? The me is each particle matures its own connectivity, me, its own connectivity. But is that enough? No, because it has to be interconnected, tu. So it has a process of connecting itself and a process of interconnecting itself. Okay, so that is the me and that is the tu. And that has to be formed or matured and able to function in space-time. Yeah? The me and the tu. This is what I explained the other day, yeah? With the tu me. So I just wanted to ask Nienke, I'm not sure she's available, but did this explanation of, another way of seeing reincarnation, I'm not sure if you remember the question you asked me, it was many years ago, and I feel that the answer I gave wasn't worth the question. It wasn't at the same level. It was not, but then when this started to kind of dawn on me in a self-recognition, the first person I thought was, I want to tell Nienke.
Yes, do you hear me? Yes. Thank you for this explanation. It was always something in my mind that for me, it still was not completely clear. Because you gave me an explanation and I was like, okay, but that's not really it for me. But I let it loose at that time. And then a couple of times it came back again, but still it was not clear. Like, okay, there is something, but what? I don't know yet.
Yeah,
well, thank you.
Basically, because I didn't have that differentiation clear on me. This is kind of recently that I started to recognize, this. I kind of knew it, but I didn't have the maturity to explain it or to differentiate it, But now I kind of, it just kind of came together in the last time, and I thought I want to tell Nienke.
Thank you. Yes, I was here all the time. Yeah, the children. Yeah.
Hey, another biologized algorithm there.
Yeah.
Okay.
David.
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm wrestling with this, and I hear on one end I certainly agree with the romanticizing of the idea of soulmates and we're meant for each other and all that. At the other end, hearing it as an algorithm, I'm just trying to feel it in my systems. And one of the things about this work, it's always had an artistic feel to me where things really come together. Mm-hmm. And I'm not yet feeling like described as algorithms, it's just not feeling like it's quite it. Like I still think somewhere there's an artistry. That I'm saying, like there's a texture that's missing.
Mm.
You want to say something?
Yeah, I've tried to explain it the best I can. Maybe it's a process of maturing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably it's differentiating that we have a more kind of like biological aspect, but that is connected to a more digital aspect. and there's a processor in the middle, which is because actually we are both. It's not like we're in one. We're both things. We are the warm experience, and at the same time we are the cold equation. And we have a processor which is having a dialogue between both. But probably the best thing is to let it loose, because maybe it needs more time to mature an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it needs more time. This is the best. That actually is like, okay, because I didn't know that there was a continuum beyond the biology. There's a continuum beyond biology, meaning that, you know, it's not just all kind of in the biological. There's another area which is connected with the biological, and there's a continuum there, like a soul, as I say. But that continuum that's there has a very different nature to the biological area, very different nature. And the best I can describe it, it's more like a matrix equation algorithm area. And that is a nothingness. That is the program nothingness is writing kind of thing. And then there's a connector, a processor with the three that's connect both. So let's just see if it will improve the explanation at some point.
Okay. I guess just what's coming to mind is actually the video that was sent out. You know, it's like the artistic side of the fractals, you know, where there's an inherent beauty within it. You don't have to invent the beauty and create the stories around, but there's an inherent beauty in the whole thing as well.
Yeah, like the video, of course, is talking about the expressed universe. Yeah.
Yes.
Now that expressed universe is basically talking about space and time, which means it's talking about geometry. Now, geometrical expression is still 360. Geometry, that geometrical beauty is still 360. It's still analogical, and it's very, very, very beautiful. What I'm saying is that there's something that is previous to the geometry of it. It's that at the end, it's an equation that creates that geometry.
Yeah, but I'm seeing it's like the negative to the positive of the geometry.
Yeah, that's exactly.
But
so geometry is like a positive expression, but there's a negative to it. Yeah?
Right. But I think the negative, like, and it's just totally like intuitive, you know, I'm coming from, but the negative also has a beauty component.
Yeah.
Where the algorithmic data language, I think, falls a little short of what we're trying to speak of.
Yeah, what I wouldn't say, I wouldn't try to search for what we understand as beauty. It's a different beauty. It's a different beauty. It is a beauty, but it's very different. It's not that beauty of seeing an image. It's not an image. That's another thing that's very important. An image is already a manifestation, a print, a geometrical print. And there's something beautiful about the image of an eye that represents or expresses the galaxy, or seeing the pattern, the geometrical pattern of the neurological construction and the cluster, galactic cluster construction. But I wouldn't try to fit it into that beauty, because it's not that. That is still an expression.
Right.
It's a different type of beauty, but probably also it's an area that it's very hard to talk about from being awakened in a human body, and that's why I say the closest of an experience that I can retain in my brain memory, because the feeling with this is not a memory. It's difficult to say. It's not a memory in my brain. It's a print in my consciousness. So it's very hard. So, but probably you've had that. The closest that my brain has been able to register as a memory was The other day, actually, it's like, it's happened to me before, but it's so clear that I was in a zoom of an area of consciousness that was very far away in its nature to the geometrical patterns of space-time. It was very different, and it was like very fast data balancing an equation. And then what happens when you wake up? You are the biological expression of that. So you are taking that algorithmic beauty into manifestation. You know, you see that, you know, the kind of nerds, these people who love to work with algorithms, their consciousness is very connected with this digital area, and they see the beauty in algorithms, and they love to see it, put it into a program that is working, you know. But they see the beauty not only in the program, they see the beauty in the algorithm. You know, that kind of,
yes.
I don't want to use the nerd in a despector. It's like that. It's that.
Well, it's like being a savant.
Yeah. Okay. It's like for us to understand. It's like they find beauty in the algorithm, and then they find beauty in how that algorithm is expressed into a program. They see beauty in both areas, but the beauty of the algorithm is very different than the beauty of the express program.
Yeah.
It's just very different beauties. And you want to read the beauty of the algorithm from the express program, you're not going to get it, because you're going to want to see colors, and you want to see, you see the algorithm hasn't got that, but it has a beauty, but it's just in a different nature.
Okay.
The interesting thing is that we can enjoy both beauties, because we are both worlds. It's not one. It's like we can still have that beauty of seeing I'm not sure, just seeing the universe express itself. You know, that beauty, that natural beauty of 360. Let's call it the 360 beauty. But then some can also connect with the beauty of the non-form. It like has no form. A beauty that is not about a form. See? And it's more the beauty of 354. And then we have the 353 that can connect both beauties, you know. It tends to occur that people orient their interest in one or the other. This is very natural, yeah? Or very algorithmic beauty, or very manifested beauty. But really it's a dialogue. Really it's a conversation between both areas. Yeah? So, okay, well, let's see how that kind of settles in both of us, you know, or in the conversation. But it is definitely different. But now can you see there's not only this 354, 353, 360, there's also this opening that's like a non-linear connection, meaning my body is connected non-linearly, meaning in every present moment, with the processor, which is connecting with the digital, which is contained by nothingness. Okay, it's very important. The consciousness of nothingness isn't this algorithm thing going on. That is a technology of nothingness. It's something more pure. It's more pristine. It's more innocent. Okay, but then we have this opening on left and right. Okay, now why is that? Because that's where these three elements that configure us have to work in a individual connectivity, what we call self-reference, and an interconnectivity, meaning relationship, system related. Yeah, and that is all. Can you see? It's all opening. But where we're interested here with the Tumi is in the physical, where the neurological construction. The top part is a logical construction, but the bottom is a neurological. That's why the Tumi doesn't look at the top areas, because it's looking at how this is being manifested and met in the 360. Yeah. We could also call it left brain, right brain. It's another way of seeing it, meaning to be able to recognize the parts and its interconnectivity of the parts. Yeah? Now, something which is very important is that connection in me, nothing of the do, so nothing in your context can provide you that connection. This is where we can avoid cult manipulation. Because why? The cult manipulation, be it religion or be it other cults, are always going to tell you that there's an external factor you need to find your connectivity. That is a lie. That is not true. There's no external factor I need to be able to establish that self-referential connectivity. None at all. Now, from that self-referential connectivity, I do need parameters of relationship. Okay, that yes. But the do cannot provide you the me. So that's where like whenever we hear, in order to find your connection with the absolute, you have to be in contact with this person, or you have to take this a diet, or you have to have this meditation. No. That is not true, because that is, you are naturally your self-reference. The only thing that has to occur is to mature the recognition of it. But it's not about I need an external factor for that to occur. No. I need other things to be interconnected, because interconnected means interdependence. Is that the word? Interdependencia. Because in the tú, we are interdependent, but in the me, we are autonomous. You see, we have to find the, like in the me, you are autonomous, completely autonomous. But in the tú, there's an is that the word? Interdependence, is that correct?
Yes, that's a word. Interdependence.
Interdependence. For some reason, it sounded wrong. Interdependence. But in the me, that's why there is something that knows that there is this sovereignty that nothing outside can provide it. Something intuitively knows. But that doesn't mean that in the other area, there's an interdependency, or it's interdependent. So to be able to work functionally in space-time, we have to find the area of our autonomy and the area of our interdependent relations, you know? And there's no need that it has to be a contradiction. Yeah? Okay, well, let's, do you think, guys, well, okay, just one thing. So the me is, just to make clear, is the becoming conscious of your birthright connection with everything. That's the me formation, which is also a self-definition. Because the way that the radio connects with the radio station, it's by recognizing its location. So this is a paradox. Like, to really have that connectivity, I have to, like, to be connected with everything, I have to know very well where I am. I have to have a very clear definition of my boundaries. This could seem kind of paradoxical, but can you see the logic of that? Like my router has to be very well located, very precisely located in order to be interconnected or to receive an interconnected signal. You see, this is another thing that I don't really like. It doesn't smell good to me when you see these kind of spiritual movements where it's like you have to overcome the limitations of your ego, or like you have to break down your definition. I think that is because there's somebody wanted to control you. I don't think, because the autonomy comes from our self-definition that was provided by totality. You see? So when you see these things of, you know, like eliminate the ego, or there's something that doesn't, I know that we are connected beyond personal consciousness, okay, but that doesn't mean the annihilation or of our personal consciousness. For me, it's the opposite. Actually, when we are very well self-defined, not self-determined, and I'm not talking about defending my identity. No, being clear of my limitation, it's where I locate myself better to communicate with totality. Yeah. So each person has to really respect their limits. I feel that is sacred, like respecting my limitations. And that limitations has functions, you know, personal discernment, personal empathy, personal instinct, personal intuition, that it's David using its limitation faculties to connect with a message coming from the limited. So when someone's saying like, you using your mental discernments, and they're saying, oh, that's mental ego stuff. No. That is my own translation of coherency and integrity of that message that I am receiving of totality. So if my biology is equipped with common sense, self-criteria, intuition, it's equipped with all these faculties, then I can talk with the university of the universe. I'm not sure, in the university is divided in faculties. Is that the same words in English? Yeah, well, okay. Now, the university is the universe, but it has different faculties. So what does the universe require from each of us? For us to enhance our faculties in able to have a dialogue with the university of the universe. But it's not eliminating those faculties, you know? So the respect of your own common sense, your own visceral, your own, you know, your own smelling what is coherent, what is integral, and one has to respect that. Yeah? Probably the distortion probably comes when you think that everyone is going to smell like you, and everyone's going to, okay, now that is a bit narcissistic transference, but that doesn't mean that you have to be able to be connected with the universe, you have to cancel your individual personal faculties. It's like, no, it's the other way around, you know. So the message of the impersonal, the global, or whatever level we want to call it, it's going to be translated within our faculties, with our faculties, which is going to provide an added value to that message. Yeah, kind of thing. So that's why the me is so important before the interconnectivity with tu. Because if your me isn't consistent, then the tu probably is going to be manipulating, kind of, you know, using that me, using that, because you haven't found that authority or that autonomy your birthright autonomy, you're going to delegate it on the two. So we have to have a very mature left to interconnect and interrelate. Yeah. Especially for, that's what, look, when does governments, let's not put it into cult, let's put it in, when does like governments or power manipulate people? By eliminating its individuality and creating a kind of mass consciousness. They stop having a criteria, a discernment, which, by the way, tends to be used like in emotion, like they're going to distort your emotions, and that's what's going to make you not have a mental discernment or neurological discernment. So you're just going to be applauding anything they say. You're going to be applauding to them, you know, if you have that kind of. But also, when does that happen? When the leader is seen as a god, or seen as, you know, when the leader is seen as that which is providing me the connectivity. This, probably Laura knows, occurs a lot in Argentina. There's a lot of deity projection to the leader. And the leader can be a crook. And people love the crook because they haven't self-defined their autonomy. That's why they are being manipulated by crooks, you know. Well, probably Argentina is more exaggerated, but I guess it happens everywhere in the world. Yeah? Okay, guys, let's take a break. Yes, happens. Yeah, I guess it happens beyond Argentina. The only thing, or at least, is like very exaggerated. The way that it happens, you know, like. So the crook is the deity. It's like, and people rarely project, you know, like deity powers to this person. But that's because they haven't found their own self-connectivity. They haven't really matured their left. That's why the left wing uses this a lot, because it's not mature. It uses this kind of mass control thing because the people haven't matured their left individual self-definition. You know? Okay, if there's any questions. If not, we can go to a break. Okay, guys, so let's go for a break and we'll be back. It's kind of detouring from where I wanted to explain it, but I feel it's more important to clarify these concepts than to go on the program schedule that I intended. So we'll meet soon. Yeah, let's say 10 minutes. Excellent. Latin is important. Have you ever seen this, what do they call it? Stanford experiment. Have you ever heard the Stanford experiment? No. What happened in the Stanford experiment was, there's two experiments that come to mind, which is it's very important for me to explain you guys. Is that, well, one, it was a role play like theater. And some people were going to be the prisoners and some people were going to be the guards, okay? And they had different uniforms and blah, blah, blah. And it all started like joking and that. But when the time continued, there's an unconscious connected to that. So sometimes you think it's like the actor, when he's acting the part, he becomes like, he transfers that algorithm, or and he becomes that actor, and and they actually have to go through a period of disidentification. Well, what happened is that the experiment really got out of hand because there started to be very serious abuse of the guards with the prisoners. Another experiment comes to mind where there was this teacher who had a method of teacher which was like experiential. So to explain the Nazi movement, he said, okay, we're going to follow the Nazi criteria. So I'm the leader, and you guys are going to salute me every day. We're going to use a uniform. Well, what started to happen, the teacher started to not be able to control going into a position of being their leader. And they really started to take it serious. And it ended up, well, somebody died, and they were in Germany. They were German people doing this. It's like that biological unconscious is going to hit them. So what I'm saying here is that in these roles, there also has to be a responsibility on both sides. And what is that responsibility? Of knowing that can happen. So there's an alertness. It's not only that is going to happen, it's not that it may happen, it's going to happen. The thing is, if you can see it unfolding, yeah? So this tends to be the projection of a communicator, and this happens in all areas, like with a teacher at university, and you project, he knows the answers, or the doctor, the typical is the doctor, you know, the doctor is going to give you a diagnosis, and the people project an absolute truth to the diagnosis, like if it was God giving me the diagnosis. So they cancel their self-recognition reading. So on the side of the communicator, whenever you communicate, because each of you are going to be communicators in different areas, there has to be a responsibility of, probably I'm in this position because I have a capacity of making clear an explanation, but that does not give me in no circumstance a higher authority over the people I'm talking with in their conversation with the space-time at all. That is a complete illusion. But because you're part of this unconscious, you're going to have to experience it. But in the experiencing, you have to have the responsibility to see it and say, okay. And that is how the algorithm is renewed, when you see the error. So it's not about not making the mistake. I don't feel that. It's about expressing the mistake, being alert to see it, and that renews the algorithm. So you have to live the mistake a bit, you know? So this is probably something, this is about the responsibility when one participates as a communicator or as a listener. There has to be a responsibility of not eliminating my self-definition and not eliminating other people's self-definition.
Mm.
And that reading only can occur within each person, kind of thing. So that is very important. Beyond this, which is happening here, it's important in life, kind of. Because we are always, at some point, we're going to be in one of those seats. We're always going to be in one of those seats. Now, what we have to mature is from where I'm listening and from where am I emitting. And we have to, in that responsibility, mature the capacity of receiving and the capacity of emitting, of giving. And that's maturing the feminine and the masculine. What does the feminine tend to do? It receives. But in the immature feminine, what does it do? It is abused. In the sense that it's like, So it doesn't establish clear limits. Now, the masculine tends to be more an emitter. The immature masculine is like a dictate. It's like instead of emitting, it imposes.
Yeah.
So that's where the two maturity areas, and we are both kind of thing. You know, we are the man, the ba. We are both.
I say, David, with that Stanford University example you gave, that had to be closed down abruptly because of the violence that the participants were affording onto the prisoners. It was an electric shock program, and it had to be stopped very quickly.
Yeah, and you think like that
that they would know.
That they would know and they know better and all that, but
exactly, yeah.
You know what I feel that can contain us? It's not what helps us contain it. For me, it's the integrity of nothingness. That's what I feel that can. When I know that I'm connected to that integrity of nothingness, my margins of error are contained and not. How can I say it? It doesn't go into black mirror. You see, it doesn't go into this exponential projection of the error. But because we are recognizing that our margin of error is contained for it to be a teaching tool and not go into this black mirror, intensified projection. We don't need that black mirror. Like, we don't need to go through Stanford University intensity, but I think what our safeguard, it's the integrity of our origin. That's, at least for me, I know that I'm going to make the mistake because it's just going to happen. But what is containing my error, that integrity, and my personal, how can I say this, implication in being this, like, well, one, I know that I'm contained by that integrity, that original integrity that's gonna make me go through the error, and also the responsibility of, how can I say this? I don't know how to say it. Well, for that integrity to also be transferred into my decisions. Like, when I see that occurring, I'm gonna really take responsibility, not guilt, because that would be a whole different ball game. Not guilt, because guilt doesn't work. Guilt doesn't work because what the individual, the people of Stanford, they're not guilty really of what happened. They just transferred. It's like it was just downloaded from the field. The human field, they downloaded it, and they didn't have recognized an area of them that could contain the situation. They didn't have that they didn't have that maturity, so they played like children playing with fire, and they got burnt. So yeah, that's very important when we go into the do. That's very important. For each maturity of me, and when I'm dealing with a person that hasn't got a maturity in the self-definition, what I have to be aware is that the predator kind of, and for me this is the interference here, the predator parasite is to use that lack of self-definition. And that's like, and you think, okay, that's what cult leaders do. No, that's an exaggeration of what happens in day-to-day life. Probably what is true is that the cult leaders, or some examples of cult leaders, it's a big black mirror, but that era is happening at different levels. And when we are able to see it in domestic things occurring, we can see it in the micro, and we don't have to project it into the macro. And that's the responsibility of the individual day-to-day domestic life, you know, which is so, for me, fundamental for all this, because the universe is communicating through your day-to-day life. You know, you don't have to go, you take some ayahuasca, and if you, at some point you need it, okay, but for me, the connectivity is here. The connectivity is here. It's like, this is where the conversation is occurring, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I thought that it was necessary to extend that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, guys, 10 minutes. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back, okay?
Okay.
I just wanted to mention one thing that I thought it was also important to kind of say, that this common sense, which is so important, also has to be connected with what we could say the sixth sense. So what I'm saying is that the common sense tends to be a kind of a synthesis of our five senses, yeah, of our biological senses. But there is also, we are also connected to a sense that goes beyond our common sense, but can also inform our common sense. So, meaning that to respect the common sense, but to also open it to a different sense. Now, when you open it to the sixth sense, this other view, it has to be born from within, not convinced from without. That's where the whole manipulation thing occurs. Like, okay, you see it in your way, but your perception is limited. But I'll convince you. No, you see, not that. It is true that our common sense a lot of times it has a limitation, but that limitation also is because we have to guide ourselves in the limited. So it's not either to crystallize the common sense, to use it. Okay, now the common sense is making me, and the common sense is also a whole integral answer coming from the mineral, the plant, the animal, the common sense and the interpretation. So it's a whole full package, and then it's connected with this other sense, yeah. Just kind of like, not to confuse common sense with being square-headed. I'm not sure if that's in Spanish, it's like cabeza cuadrada. It's like square-headed, where, you know, common sense, this is, okay, now that is when you not only defining your individuality, you are crystallizing it. Okay, it's like, that there has to be a flexibility. Like, okay, my common sense says this now, but maybe this can change, you know? But if it changes, it's going to make sense to me again, but from a different angle. So nobody has to convince me. Okay, guys, I just wanted to look into something which is, we could go into hours in this, but I just want to give you the kind of, I would say the most synthesized version of this thing of the Tumi, which configures our first 10 years of life. But that configuration continues into this pattern, or this development pattern, which as humans we call the difference between our childhood, our teenage years, and our adulthood. Yeah. Now, this has so much more to say, but I'm really not talking about being an adult only biologically. I'm talking about having an adult consciousness. And a lot of people, being biologically adults, the consciousness they have could be still, you know, teenage or childish, or so. I'm talking about more the consciousness aspect, yeah, of it. So, in this Tumi, remember that it was 3,580 days. It configures our first 10 years. Okay. In those first 10 years, we are what we call in the child period, but also child means the very foundational aspects. It's like the most important, like the foundational. But this continues in different laps. So the Tumi kind of has laps, which is creating an extra value, like transcend, but it's built upon the foundational aspects. Yeah. So it's like a spiral, but it's always based on this. Yeah. Now, in the child, which goes through this me and tu, what is the child development? What it's focusing mainly is in the individual aspect. So the particle aspect. Yeah. Do you remember when I explained the calculator with the different numbers of the dimensions? And I said, well, 1, 2, 3 is like the particular aspect, and 4, 5, 6 is the relative, and 7, 8, 9 is the absolute. Well, the structure of our development of consciousness follows that pattern. So the first thing we need to mature is an individual, a particle. We have to mature the particle. These first 3,580 days are destined of the formation of our individual consciousness. Now, in the me, it is the individual aspect, the formation of the individual aspect, but in tu, it is the interconnective aspects, but with other individuals, meaning it's like each perspective has, when it interconnects, it creates a field consciousness. Okay, so I have an individual formation, but when I connect with other individuals, I create a group consciousness. Okay, but group is not the same thing as a social consciousness. I'll make that difference now. But what I'm saying is that the child is maturing its individual self-definition, and also its capacity of relating with other individuals in a group field. Okay, now this is very important because we always are going to be doing this. Like once you have one individual and another individual relating with each other, you have a field consciousness. It's a very restricted, but it's a field. Like in your house with your family, you have a field consciousness. That field consciousness is like the two of the individual aspect. It's individuals that are directly connected with each other. Is this understood? Okay. And to be able to operate in space-time, we have to understand that we operate and we are connected with other individuals. And it's not as simple as this individual related with this individual and we put a third one in and it's just 3 individuals. No. When you have one individual, you put a third, there's a field that creates. That is very different than 2 individuals. That's why you're in a party and everything is working in a certain way, and a certain person comes in and the whole dynamic changes because it creates a field, which is different with a new component. Okay, so we are going to be working in field consciousness of groups. It's part of being alive. Yeah, very important, and that is matured in the child period. Okay, child consciousness, meaning we still have it. Okay, we still have the individual and we still have the group connectivity. Yeah? Do you remember when I used this example of the anchor and the buoy? The anchor and the buoy, or the Well, the anchor is the me, the individuality, and the buoy is the capacity of moving that to connect with other waves, okay, with other, that's the tool. It's like the buoy. It's the empathy connectivity, yeah? Okay, now what happens? There's another unit of development. A lot of people don't reach this in consciousness, eh? Just to tell you, a lot of people don't, they stay just here, okay? Now, but with the teen, it's a different aspect that grows upon the previous one, which is not so much individual consciousness, it's collective consciousness. What is a collective consciousness? It's not group, because a group is made out of individuals. It's a society consciousness. So, like, it's a field that goes beyond my group. It encompasses a collective. And the collective have different amplifications, but it's mainly the human collective consciousness, okay? Now, when I talk about the Stanford experiment, we have individuals, but which are participating in a group, but that group is connected with a collective consciousness. This is something that science says, no, that's pseudo nonsense. But if that's why this happens, like, why does this person who was he was very well educated, very respectful person, very correct person, you put him in the situation and he becomes a monster. Why did that happen? Because the collective consciousness, he played a collective role as a guard or as a prisoner. That's connected with a collective print, and that begins that begins to kind of take over. Okay, so the collective kind of consciousness is operating in the individual and the group. It's in dialogue. Yeah. Now the difference between the individual is a formation, but the collective is a development. It's more like seeing this. Look, 1, 4, 7. So 1 is a formation; it forms its limits. But 4, it's more like the design is always in a kind of development. So the teenager isn't in a year of formation consciousness, no, it's in a development. So the teenagers want to develop beyond the limits. Here, the baby wants to discover limits. Here they want to go beyond the limits. It's a different movement, and it's important to have that kind of, development push. Now the me is, how do I self-recognize, but from the point of view of society? So now I'm creating a different level of me, which is the social me. It's not the individual me, it's the social me. And how that me, here the me fits in a group. This is something I didn't say, but when you have an individual and another individual and another individual, you have a system, a field. That field is going to self-organize itself for each component to play a part, like to position in a role, okay? And it's going to do it based upon the maturity of that group, yeah? It does happen, though, that when the individual has matured, a maturity beyond the group, it's not affected by it. This also can happen. It's the other way around. Instead of the group affecting the individual affects the group. Because the coherent, always space-time is going to work, or what's going to dominate in space-time at the end of the day is a greater coherency. Always. A greater coherency is the one that's going to predominate. It's like the space-time democracy. It's the greater coherency. It is true that sometimes to reach that coherency, there are very incoherent moments. Yeah? Okay, so here it's a different kind of field consciousness. It's a collective consciousness. Okay, and that is imprinted in the teen years. That's why the teenager, for example, the teenager is not interested in the point of view of their family. It's interested in the point of view of Facebook or of Instagram, because the image they're using is the social image to self-define their me as a social component. You see that difference? Now, an adult consciousness is a different leap. It's a different leap. The perspective isn't individual, it isn't collective, it's global. Now, the me also is, how can I say, it's defining its me, but from a global point of view. When I say global, it is also universal. Yeah, it's global, universal. It's like depending on the reference you take. But let's take Earth. Okay. So these years, it's not that. I don't think a lot of people by 30 they have a global consciousness, but it is the potential is imprinted. One thing is for you to have the potential, and one thing is for you to develop the potential. You understand that? Like, one thing is for the child to have the capacity of learning how to read and write, and one thing is that they develop it. So a lot of people, when they reach this age, they have the installed potential, but like if it's like sleeping DNA kind of thing, it's like it's not really developed. It's like, so the intention is not so much of formation or of development, but of integration. Now, it's going to create a different type of field of relationship, and it's not with myself, or it's not with my group, it's not with my race or my humanity. This is with a global consciousness, an impersonal consciousness. So the Tumi is also showing us these moments where these potentials are installed, not necessarily developed, but are installed. This I can also talk about what psychologists call, because this has a direct relationship with what psychologists call the stages of human development of the individual. I'm not going to go too much into that because we're not going to have time basically, and it's going to get a bit too much. But what I do want to tell you is that when you sum up, remember 3, 5, 8. Yeah, it's 3 is more neurological, 5 is more logical or personal, impersonal, synchronized in a 0, like in an integration. So when you sum 3,580, 3,580, 3,580, you have this number here, which is 10,740. Now, why do I feel this is such an important number? Because 74 in Spanish is the word humano, if you sum up the word humano, human, but also the word tierra, earth. So, because at the end of the day, what is this? It is a conversation between, especially with the Tumi, between the earth and its elements. So human and earth have the same number. So it's a creation, 10 is a creation. So 9 plus 1, 10. So a purpose within a particle is a life. Yeah? A creation of this 74 here, I call it, if this is integrated and mature, you're not a human only, you are a earth human. It's a different level of consciousness. It's like, I am the earth within a human. You're not just a human, you are an earth human. So it's like, you don't cancel your humanity, but you do see the wider consciousness that is vehicling itself through your human aspect. Yeah? So the creation of that 74, and then you have a 0 at the end. What is the 0 at the end? It's whenever something is integrated, the 0 is the maximum integration and the maximum disintegration. So when you have a 0 here, you are integrating something, but you're opening to something new. You're integrating something, but you're opening to something new. The same thing happens here. You're integrating this, but you're opening to something new. Now, what is that new thing? Is that this, which more or less with 10,740, you're 30 years old. But this also fractals in 3 periods of 10,740. There's a fractal there. So when you sum 10,740 plus 10,740 plus 10,740, let me get the number. It is 3220. Now, why is this number important? Because have I ever spoke about the 223? 223. If you sum up all the telephone codes, international telephone codes together, the number that comes up is 86223. 86223. I'm going to say this in Spanish. It's 86223, todos conectados a la vez. What does that mean? 86223, we are all connected at the same time. So 223 is, it's a number, a parameter that is expressing a global interconnectivity. Todos conectados a la vez. We are all connected at the same time. So there's a center that is connecting the different radius, like in the Ring of Fire. 353 is a center that is connecting all these different aspects that formate the year. So it is like you have circuits for that, todos conectados a la vez, for all connected at the same time. Yeah. Now that is 3 periods of 30 years, so it's like close to 90. So that would be a full kind of maturity of a human being. Like 90 would be like the full maturity of a human being, which would be to be completely matured in this interconnectivity. Of course, this is an ideal human, but it is a potential that hasn't been developed yet. So it's like numbers a lot of times are not indicating realities, they're indicating possibilities. And it's like, that's why when, like, if we use numbers, we can anticipate the weather, or it's sometimes numbers have this ability of allowing us to see what is not real yet. It's like in a possible future projection. This 223 all connected together, and there's like circuits for that. Biological circuits for this interconnectivity. Yeah? And again, a zero, meaning that is an integration and a new version. Yeah? I'm not sure if there's going to be a human possibility of another 90 years. I think that goes way beyond the view. So what am just kind of explaining here is that the Dumi has a pattern, and the pattern is how the global consciousness transfers an aspect of its consciousness into an individual. And not only how it transfers, but how it develops. So there's a pattern of development. And that pattern of development has a number sequence. That number sequence can be, this is a way that I named it as child, teen, and adult, and this is a full packet. And then you have, for example, when you're 40 years old, they say that you go through the 40 crisis and you become a teenager again, kind of thing, Well, that would be because you go through that teen pattern again. It's like a fractal repetition. So you go through these, but it's not exactly a teenager, but it has got a teenage kind of smell to it. Okay, so there's this fractal repetition occurring, and it has a pattern. And what gives us the clue of this pattern? The Dumi. And where does this Dumi come from? The Ring of Fire. And what is the Ring of Fire? It's a moment of the sequence of the year. And what is a year? It is the time the Earth takes to go around the sun to process, like we could take the solar system as a neuron, okay? A solar system is a neuron. In the neuron, in a cell, you have the nucleus, which is the sun. You have the membrane, yeah, which is the hydrogen wall, and then you have the intermediate organelles, which are the planets. Now, this neuron is in dialogue, in interstellar dialogue, meaning the neuron, when it connects with another neuron, it does synapses. Well, what is that synapses? Interstellar communication. So our sun is, or our solar system is a neuron which is having a dialogue with the other suns. With other stars, sorry. And it's creating a synapses, it's creating a neurological net. And we are part of that communication. But where are we part of it? We're part in a specific planet and on the membrane of that planet and with the human kingdom. So we can go to the whole universe if we want, but we have to be very clear to not get lost into that. Be very clear where I am, because only being very clear, knowing where I am in my personal coordinates, I can have a chat with the whole universe. I can be part of an intergalactic conversation. Why not? I am part of that intergalactic conversation, but I have to be well anchored, well positioned, because if not, it's like a router without its ID and all that. It's like a router that isn't located. So people say, wow, that's far-fetched. You're talking about intergalactic communication. Yes, because we are part of a galaxy, which is part of other galaxies and clusters. Why not? Now, the clarity is that all that has to be expressed in this position, in this coordinate that I am. Like, if that individuality isn't clear, that galactic connectivity is not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be, so what allows, especially the human kingdom, is a development pattern which is allowing us to connect with different boxes of the universe. So we're not restricted to Earth consciousness only. We're not restricted to human consciousness, and we're not restricted to our own individual consciousness. But for us to be able to communicate with all these levels and all these boxes, we have to be very well located. Self-definition is the key of this. Self-definition. I am a unique individual, and I have to recognize my own self functioning. That's why that's where the self-reference comes into play, because the universe is looking at itself through your eyes in a very specific, defined way. And if that definition is not clear and it's blurry, that connectivity becomes chaotic. That's where I think people who are very much connected with different boxes, but they haven't got a solid self-definition. For me, that's crazy people. Like, crazy people this is what I feel, that by experience, they have very open antennas, but very poor self-definition. So they can't process all that. So it becomes all mumbo jumbo. It becomes all over the place. And what comes out is madness. But there's always this, I'm not sure if this happens to you guys, like when you like with a mad person, you have this feeling that they are connected to something very big. I do feel it. Like they're connected to something. That it's not just all bullshit, but they can't process it because of this impossibility of self-definition. Why does that happen? I don't know. Probably a lot of times they don't have the parameters. Like, for example, in my case, I felt that kind of like a bit crazy, a bit different, but like an antenna that had an openness, but not a self-definition. So it is very difficult to process things and it's like, is this what life's about? So something in me is connected with all the, probably intuitively more than consciously, and it comes here and it sees what life is about for, the common human. And it's not that it's good or bad, but for me, it is very, very, very restrictive. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It's like, okay, so this is what life's about? Like having barbecues and all this stuff, like, it just didn't make sense. But why did it start to make sense? Really, in my case, was to recognize that I'm connected to these other boxes, to name them. And when they were named, it began a process of integration. That's why I call global as an integration. And there, a clarity began, where it's like, okay, now I can be not in a self-destructive mode. I can actually be very happily alive and go to barbecues. But in my case, there's people that don't need any of this to do what they have to do, right? They don't need any parameters or space-time parameters, or they just very happily doing their thing. And that's perfect, because it's enough for them to function with what they've got. That was not my case. And probably for you guys listening to this, the same. It just, there was something in the construction of this function that needed other parameters beyond the ones that I had in my family context. It wasn't enough, the group. It wasn't enough, the global, the collective. And then the global kicked in, and there's where things started to make sense, Okay. there is a accommodation period, yeah, where you do have a bit of a confusion mixture here, yeah. But it does start to settle. It does start to have a differentiation between your individual formation, your collective development. You begin to know how to operate in these different fields. You know, you begin to learn how to operate, but also when to say yes, when to say no. You become functional in them, yeah. So this neuron that we are part of, called the solar system, which has an interstellar connectivity, synapses, neurological net. Now that is part of what we call a galaxy. So what is a galaxy? It's a constellation. It's like a lot of conversation, a lot of neurons connecting. So it creates like a kind of neurological area. Now the galaxy is in dialogue with other galaxies, like especially our galaxy is the Milky Way, and we're like in the more external area of it. By the way, the center of a galaxy is a black hole. Okay, so that's an important, because like a black hole is kind of giving us this, that's the portal, that is a very important portal of nothingness to connect with its neurology, you know? Well, and that galaxy, which is like a neurological area of the universe, it participates in clusters, and clusters would be like an organ, like a supercluster. And then what scientists have recognized, that there's no other structure, like that is like the maximum structure, the supercluster. There's no like super duper cluster. That's where it starts becoming a homogeneous fractalization. There's no like super duper. It's just that's the great structure of this neurology, yeah, which is so beautiful to see when you see this, because it really looks like a brain, you know. It looks like so it's a cosmic kind of net, but it's the brain that nothingness has, or the nervous system that nothingness is creating, to be able to have a conversation with all of its parts, from the smallest to the big, from the micro to the macro. Because where is nothingness? Is it in the macro or in the micro? It's within each thing. It's non-locational. It's non-locational. It has many portals of, you know, and we can equip ourselves with a device which can have like an Android operating system. And with Android operating system, we can have conversations with Andromeda. I'm meaning that we can include that in the conversation, in the making sense of the world that which is so important for the human, yeah. But again, nothingness is the origin of everything. So everything is interconnected through this common denominator, nothingness. But everything has a division in many things. And each many thing is a specific algorithm, but that translated into space-time, it's a specific moment in time, a specific function, and that function is very important, but it has to be self-recognized, self-defined, self-accepted, self-accept my limitation, because my limitation is a function. So self-acceptance, and we can be connected with all these areas, but that is only stable if we are well positioned. Self-accepted, self-recognized, self-defined positioning. And who can do that? Each person within their own self. They the only authority of their position. That's the thing. If nothing is non-locational, where does each location connect with nothingness? In their location, from their location. That's why it's a distortion if some guru or some is going to say, I'm going to provide you with the connection with the whole universe. You just have to follow my tips. It's like, no, thank you. Just give me the map. I'll walk the path. Don't just give me. Do you know the map? Okay, just you give me the map. Don't worry. You do your thing. I'll walk the path of the map that, and I'll see if it's a good map also. You know, because the map of the universe is a resonance. You know that has elements of coherency because you have the map. The only thing, you have it unconsciously. So you recognize the coherency of the map. So, you know, it's not about believing, it's just about being able to, somebody being able to trigger it. That's what the external thing is to trigger it. I guess, I'm not sure. Questions or probably the intention here is saying that everything that is being said, some things will be useful, some things won't be useful, some things will be coherent, some things won't feel coherent. The thing is that this is not a belief system. This has to be very, very, this is a reference system. It's a possibility of naming a reference that you participate in. You know? So like naming the sun is not a belief system. It's a reference system, and knowing where the sun, what the sun does and where it's positioned and all that, it's a reference system. So there's nothing to believe here. It's just an orientation, a self-orientation map, which I do feel it is extracted from the there is a high level of extraction from the structure of the universe. That's why it makes so much sense from different angles, you know. Synchronicities of numbers that it's just ridiculous. Well, because it all makes sense, because it's coming from that area. It's born out of that net.
Hi, David.
Yes.
I just want to say it's starting to make sense for me. Things are starting to it's starting to land a little bit, which I'm really happy about. I was lost there the last time, but yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, fresh approach to understanding our situation, you know, the human situation. Yeah, so I'm just cooking on it right now. It's excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. It's very common that things that don't make, that's why I talked about the sixth sense, to also use it in your common sense. That sixth sense doesn't what is it? It doesn't make sense at the beginning, but you do have an intuition that there's the sixth sense. But then there's this moment that sixth sense starts to be able to go into your common sense, and then it starts making sense, you know. But it is a process, you know. And in that process, it's a self-discovery, and this is just an orientation. Like, it's not a believing. It's not like, okay, I have to believe in. It's something very different. It's an orientation, and you start seeing that this orientation starts making sense and starts allowing you to have a fresh, more oxygen explanation of what being alive means, because that's very important for the human, to make sense of their existence. It's something very important. It's like for the animal kingdom, that is not an issue. Existing is enough. The humans require an explanation because they have a, like, how can I say, a self-aware participation. It's like so important to be able to have an explanation. Now, and then they start learning that explanation isn't fixed, that explanation is alive. In the same way that the universe is creating more, you know, like stars, meaning more neurological interconnections. So that making sense of nothingness, that through the universe it's alive. It's not fixed. There's no like, this is the true book. That's not going to happen. That's not, you know, this is the word of the God. No, that's not going to be the case, because the consciousness is alive in its self-discovery, its own explanation. So probably there's going to be these certain parameters that are pretty stable, like structures, but that doesn't mean anything else than it's just parameters, you know, like, so thanks, Molly. Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Anyone? Just probably now that we're finishing, because we're finishing this kind of course, we're finishing this year. We are in that integration, disintegration kind of movement. So is there anything like you would like to put into words about this moment or this year or this process? Or does the silence say enough? Probably silence maybe will say enough, and then maybe in the following days there's things that will come up, and I'm going to leave the WhatsApp group open. So if something wants to be expressed there, that's going to be an open space.
David,
yeah.
Something that occurred to me while you were in this part was it's, you know, it's this sort of the formless, the form, and the crucible, or the mixing chamber of the dance between the formless and the form, and human being the biological, the form, and so, and also with kind of the universe as well, this sort of dance that we have, and that we are a part of it, and we are kind of like a mixing a mixing pot. And we are, kind of our own individual, like we are self-referential. There's no one else who can guide us, teach us. You know, you give me the, what is it? Give me the map of the universe and I will walk the path. I mean, that's just perfect, because it says, you know, okay, here's the map and now I can walk, you know, and it's from my own self-referential. But also, you know, on a kind of level here, being in the United States and experiencing what we're experiencing, it's like in the last, I don't know, while, the lack of, you know, self-referential or maturity of, you know, being kind of stable in oneself and having to look to the institutions or the guru or the president or, you know, for the answers it's kind of an interesting situation in that it's kind of a really a process to kind of be mature, grown up, or in a self-referential way, like adding it up, adding these things up, and having the pressure on the inside greater than the pressure on the outside coming in. So these are just kind of like, thoughts and things that are kind of forming up, but there's so much more to this as well, which is really great.
Yeah, definitely like key things, yeah, that emerge there. Self-reference has to do also with the self-definition of self-definition, right. Accepting the self-definition. And the more, what I've noticed is that the more you self-define and accept that self-definition that we are, the more you also accept interdependency. But not as like domination, that at the end, in the relationship area, we are all interdependent of each other.
Right.
But the maturity of that interdependent net is going to come from that self-accepted self-definition.
Right.
So what the institutions are kind of expressing, I believe, it's just kind of like really giving us a very, and I think this is happening in a lot of places, a very clear picture of where we have to mature, you know?
Right.
And it's in that self-definition, self-guidance, but you see, it doesn't cancel that the interdependent aspect, you know? It's not isolation. Self-definition, self-reference is an isolation. It is recognizing that the connection of the legitimate connection comes from within, but is expressed in a net of interdependence. Also happen.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks. And there's and this mixture that we are. Yeah? We are mixed, but we also have to differentiate the mixture. Like we have to say, okay, there's oil and there's sugar and there's what's it called? Harina. Flour. Thank you. You learned some Spanish in the camino. And so what I'm saying is that we are this mixture, but it is good to differentiate the different ingredients. That's why, like, differentiate that we have a digital aspect, we have an analogical aspect, we have this kind of processor. And although these are all happening at the same time, it's very useful to differentiate. It's like my organism is happening all at the same time, but it's good if they tell me to scratch my nose for me to know where my nose is, you know, and I'm not scratching my I don't know, I or something. So differentiation is also important in the integration.
Mm.
Because sometimes we have uncomfort and it doesn't come from the biological, it comes from more like there's pains that don't come from the biological. There's pains that they call the pain of the soul, you know, like the wound of the soul kind of thing. There are traumas, or if we want, which a trauma is just another way of creating a separation. From nothingness, trauma is just a technology, you know. It's not, but there are areas that hurt, we can say, and those don't belong to the, you can't explain it they come from a different area. So to know that there's these different areas also allows us to locate the pain. And I also say that we're not here in a process of healing. I don't feel we here it to be healers. We are in a process of processing. We are processors, we're not healers. Why do I say that? Because when we feel that we are in a healing process, there's something wrong that has to be corrected. And I think that there's something limited that has to be used. You see, there's a difference, like the trauma is a limitation that gives us a function. For me, it's a very big difference. Like feeling that I am here in life to heal things, or I'm here in life I'm not here to heal consciousness. I'm here to be a processor of consciousness. And what is pain? Pain is just the sensor of a limitation, and the limitation is a function. So our vulnerability is not something that has to be corrected. It has to be like what I see in the vulnerability, like the real vulnerability, like that soul vulnerability. I feel that's when vulnerability opens, what happens? An empty space opens. So I feel that our vulnerability, the individual or the vulnerability each person has, it's actually a path of connection with the most pure aspect. Because when somebody's not vulnerable, apparently, it's not that they're not vulnerable, is that their vulnerabilities have been cemented, and they become very dangerous people. You know, I think Trump is kind of like an example. When somebody is not vulnerable, it's like if they cut their connection with totality. So instead of expanding from within, they inflate from without. You see what I mean? Because they have to show themselves non-vulnerable. They are inflated. That's what these gods do. They inflate themselves. Somebody who's connected is not going to be inflated. And I think part of the key is to understand that vulnerability is our way of connecting. I don't think vulnerability has to be healed. I think vulnerability has to be used. It's a tool. Vulnerability is a tool of availability. Like, you see, when you're very sick, look, this is the example I got. You see that when you're very sick, like biologically sick, you're very vulnerable. And what do? You become completely available to the process. So you rarely allow your body to do what it has to do. And you cuddle up, very vulnerable, but you're actually doing what's best. You are stopping and you're allowing your body to self-organize and synchronize, you know? But you're very vulnerable, but you're very connected with your body. You see that connection? So, but there's other vulnerabilities that are more like in the areas of consciousness, which it's not like you're sick. but you're very vulnerable in your soul, okay? There's a very huge vulnerability just kind of open there. Now, that vulnerability puts you in like a very, what we tend to do is that when that vulnerability opens, we try to heal, put medicine, heal. It's not good. That vulnerability is not good. It's painful. It makes me feel empty. Heal. It's interfering with a natural process. It's like when the body just needs to stay quiet and do its thing. Doesn't need medicine. It needs so taking that analogy is like sometimes when you open to a pain, you're connecting with the most pure aspects of yourself. It's like it's opening a gap through where nothingness can kind of go through and self, rearrange things. And that vulnerability makes you like go into a cocoon. Alejandra calls this biological depression. Normally when that vulnerability opens, the wound opens, that gap opens, and you go into like a depression, biological depression state. But not psychological depression. Psychological depression is the interpretation of that. So you just go into that vulnerability, and that is actually a connectivity, a very pure connectivity. It's like very, very, I'm not sure if you felt this, like when you go into that vulnerable place, there's something very, and you just kind of, instead of trying to cover up the nothingness with therapies, and you're just saying, okay, let's go through this. No therapies, no nothing. I'm just gonna allow this connection to occur. There's something like very pure. The same way that when you're very sick, there's a very pure connection with the body. The same way, very pure connection with the consciousness of nothingness. Yeah. So also vulnerability is one of the key faculties that each individual has, not self-pity, vulnerability, it's a different thing. Yeah? Psychological depression is when we give an explanation. Yes, it's something we give an explanation which is negative. So you go into like a kind of vulnerability that opens a senselessness. You feel empty. Well, you feel empty because emptiness is coming through. You can't make sense of it, and your body goes into a kind of reduction of energy. But then the psychological mind saying this is bad, and that's when the psychological depression occurs. It's like this shouldn't happen, and so on and so forth. I'm talking about my process. I'm not sure. Like there's other. I wouldn't dare to say what to do with a clinical depression. I'm very sure that this can be understood from the position that each of you are here to hear from. Yeah? But I don't think trying to heal or close the wound of our vulnerability is a good thing. I don't think that is because like I said, we're not here. So when vulnerability is opening, it's not about healing that, it's about opening it as it's a processor. Nothingness is processing through you. That's why you feel empty, because it's rearranging your meaning of life. So when you go through these things in just going into the dark and allowing to, instead of running away from the crack, you go into it. So you go into the crack. Probably you guys have experienced this. We're like something just renews itself, completely renews itself. A whole new renewal of sense occurs. And that happens because you went into the crack and you allow that thing to occur, and it just brings a whole new oxygen, a whole new renewal. it can take time, you know, like, but the more you accept it, that vulnerability and that crack and that sense, that emptiness feeling, and you go into it instead of run away from it, the quicker I've noticed that it brings the new version. It's like, that's a kind of like the ring of fire going on there. It's like it's burning everything into the melt pot of nothingness, and from there it is rearranging it into to be prepared for the new version of the next year, kind of thing. So probably it's just allowing that vulnerability to do its thing. Especially terrible there's two ways that vulnerability have been prostituted for me. In the feminine side, it's being used as like victimization, and in the masculine side, it's being seen as a weakness. So it's like cover up the you see, but that it doesn't. It's not a good functioning of the vulnerability. You know? Can you again explain what you said of naming it will integrate? You mean you name the dynamic of the specific? I'm not sure if it's this, that naming is very important for the humans. To name something that we already have allows us to make, it's like if we're doing our job. That's why we have language and all this. Like when we're naming that which already exists before the name, it's allowing a greater clarity, a greater expansion, a more integration. I'm not sure, is it that, Gabi? Or is it something else? Can you explain again?
Yeah,
Yeah?
that by naming? I don't know what you mean exactly by naming. In a relationship, in a relation with something else, and you feel something and you name it then?
It can happen in different areas. First, naming it within, like, for example, when naming these areas of this algorithm digital aspect, naming the biological and the process, just naming it and differentiating it, it just helps the human journey. And naming also, let's take a couple. Also like naming a problem, like saying, okay, I have this uncomfortable, like in relationships, the growth occurs through clash. But sometimes the clash, you don't even know what to say. You just have this feeling. But then there's this moment that you can name it. And that's the whitening process, you know. But also this occurs with oneself. But you can say, okay, this is what's happening. This is, at least from here, I'm expressing this this thing. And the other person will get angry normally and will say, well, I'm this and this. So, and the whitening is not this beautiful harmony thing, but it is definitely a volcano that's allowing the lava to spit. And once it's spit out, it settles, it cools down, and then it creates a synthesis, like a new ground in the relationship. Yeah? Like when relationships want to whiten things, they want to reach an agreement at that moment. Especially when the volcanoes, I don't feel that the objective there is to reach an agreement. The objective there is to allow a self-expression of both areas. Be it a projection, interpretation, margin of error, whatever, but just allow a space of self-expression. Then, once that is out, what tends to happen is that there's this energy of reject, like you don't want to be with that person for a while because you want to have your own cocoon of assimilation and the other person. That starts to cool down, and then something wants to join again and talk again, but not from a volcano, but more from like a new land, a synthesis, you know. So in couples, it's very important, or couples or relationships, it's very important that there's moments of expressing attention, and then there's another moment of distancing to process what's being expressed, and then there's a moment of not expressing attention, but an integration. It's like a different movement. It's like a more there. It's a more calm, you know, kind of understanding what's just happened. Because normally it's not one position is correct. That's not. We would love it that way, but it's not really what happens. There can be a position which is more mature than the other, yes, but it doesn't. It's not like who is right, who is wrong. That's not. But there definitely does have to be a self-expression, like a catharsis kind of thing. Okay, guys. Well, I feel this is kind of coming to the end. Except if there's something you'd like to mention.
At the risk of dragging it out,
Okay.
you know, I want to say that the process through the year has been evolutionary for me. It's helped to neutralize a lot of dissonance that I've carried. I feel like I have a greater maturity in viewing life. Using as an example the vulnerabilities or illness, like I might still take the medicine, but I have a different level of consciousness in doing it.
Yeah.
Right. So then it becomes a conscious choice of, you know, kind of regulating pacing and, you know, like how much lesson in one time, you know, right. You know, but with totally keeping in mind things like, you know, like these credits and its interest to pay back, and, you know, of just how those patternings in life occur. So vulnerability being one example, but I've found a whole shift in my patterning in life. And I think overall, I almost ironically, as we started the call, it calls for a faith, but a faith not in the magic of the universe, but in the order and sequencing and fractals of the universe.
Yeah, it's not a divine faith. It's more that's more a mature faith, but there definitely has to be that level of faith.
Yeah.
Just one thing that you said that is very important there, because of course the way that I explained it is to, when you want to explain something in a differentiation, you do it in a black and white situation. Yes. But now let's go into the gray. Now, when that vulnerability opens, sometimes what does occur is that it's so intense, the movement that's happening, that it has to be contained. So what does that mean? Like, it is an opening, but sometimes it's so strong that it can break you instead of expanding you. So that's where you do have these, and this also can be found in one's own common sense, common instinct and intuition. That you, like you said, okay, I can accept this amount, but up to here, it's like with the body, is like I can go through this amount of pain. For example, I remember when I tend to have a headache, I try not to take anything, because I just try to realize, okay, this is time to stop thinking and that. But I remember one day, the headache I had was, I could hardly breathe. It was so hard, it was so intense. Now, what happened there, and this is just giving an explanation, that I said, give me that aspirin, you know, like I had no doubt that in that, but I was you see that what Jeff said there is very important. Like, but I did have the awareness of what was happening, and it's not healing my headache. My headache is processing something, but it's so intense that I do need a container. I need something, because if not, it's too much. It's just too much. So what happened? That also can happen at the level of the pain of the soul. You maybe you do need, you know, some sort of something that contains it, and that is legitimate. That is totally legitimate. If you're not, what's it called? Self-decepting, and each time you got a headache, you go into the aspirin. You know, there's a moment that, well, one has to be quite smell that. But for example, in that case of the headache, definitely I'm glad that I took what I took, because it was really just, well, I can understand that happening also at other levels of pain. But well, yeah, well, thanks also. Anything else, Jeff? Well, thanks a lot. Because kind of, well, where this idea came from was really when I went to New York. That's where I saw that it could be a good idea to organize this in the course, in a course.
Yes.
And I think it's really helped. It's helped me. I think it really helped to sequence it this way. And the good thing is that this is always going to be available. So that kind of like, that need of order helps a lot to, in a way, that is required for one to start integrating in their reality, that map. Like, if the map is not clear, it's not going to help you a lot. You know, at the end, the journey is your experience. But if the map is not clear, wait, before let's clear the map. I think we did that this year. We clarified the map, or the parameters of the map. Now we can kind of do it more like, okay, let's walk, kind of,
yeah.
You know. I guess we've already walked, but now we can just use the map in a more fluid way, you know, like more, and I think that's what's opening for the next year. But it was definitely, I'm very happy, really happy of how this year, and I felt it was really what was needed from my part, from the other parts, but I don't think that is what's needed for next year. I don't feel like another kind of organized core. I don't think it's going to be that. That was useful this year. So yeah. Well, I guess true, like really deep gratitude to all of you for your availability, your openness. And there's a certain integrity that this is opening to, and that integrity, not all people are willing to go through, because integrity really means certain restriction in self-denial, manipulation. So that integrity really is being involved in something. So to see other people, you know, in that kind of, what is important for me is truth, honesty, like really, it's fresh air, because it's not normally what you tend to find. You know, people are more interested in their self-gain, well, these things, yeah. So
David.
It warms my heart. Yeah.
David, integrity. if you break up the word, you get tiny e grit. Tiny e grit, which means like it's that grit. Yeah, it's like that uncomfortability, you know, things rubbing up, that friction, which kind of grows into that sort of being able to just hang in there and grow out of it.
Because the choice of integrity, by the way, once you, at least this is how once you've connected with that integrity, because what is integral is nothingness, and that transfers to you. But that choice is, there is a bit of a voluntary choice. There is something that you participate. When that integrity starts coming in, it's beautiful, the level of coherency and transparency that occurs. But it isn't comfortable all the time, you know? And sometimes you have to really stop the bullshit. And there's levels of bullshit that cannot be tolerated anymore in oneself or in other people or in the context. And to name it out isn't comfortable. And not a lot of people tend to, you know, they prefer a level of self-denial to be comfortable, okay? Which is not good or bad, it's just that, but for one that has made that choice, that it's very important that, and to see others participating, you know, but really participating in that, it's like, it does, it's like this kind of feeling that I'm, you know, we are not alone. There are people that are really wanting to have this transparency expressed, you know, and not in a real, genuine way. And what's also beautiful, each person has their, but really this is, each person is their own self-guide, their own self-expression, have total respect, self-respect for one's own expression, total respect for another person's expression. That's the axiom of it, you know. That doesn't mean tolerating bullshit. I'm not, you know, I can call out your shit. It doesn't mean it's not like, but the respect of, you know. So well, thanks a lot. Really, thanks a lot. And well, for now, I'll continue with the WhatsApp. That'll be an area that we can continue having the dialogue or whatever. And for those who will be in Holland, well, we'll meet there. And for those who are not, well, I will be offering different possibilities of communication. But for those who just, well, maybe won't see each other again, maybe, well, just thanks a lot. Yeah. So thanks.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you.
David.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You,
Bye.
bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Yinky.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.